Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to another webinar section. My name is Olayinka Abawale. I'm a sales development representative here at Secure Intelligence Limited, and I will be your host for today. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on proactive cloud monitoring that prevent issues before they arise. I am delighted and excited to have you all here because we have got a valuable section lined up for you. And I'm glad to introduce our distinguished and experienced speaker, Emmanuel. So Emmanuel is a cloud engineer at Secure Intelligence Limited. So Emmanuel is going to be running us through cloud proactive monitoring that prevents issues before they even arise. And at the end of this section, I'm confident that we are going to have a clearer picture of how to keep our cloud environment running smoothly. So how are you doing today, Emmanuel?
I'm fine. Thank you so much, Wale. Good
Good
afternoon.
to have you here, Emmanuel. So Emmanuel is a cloud engineer at Secure Intelligence Limited. But before I hand over to Emmanuel, I'm going to be running us through some housekeeping rules in order to maintain some decorum. So firstly, this section is being recorded and will uploaded on our social media platform at Secure Intelligence Limited on our YouTube channel. And secondly, you will notice some reaction emoji on your screen. So please use them to engage with us through this webinar. So it actually helps us to know you are with us and also keeps the energy up. So you can always make use of the reaction emoji that you can see on your screen. And lastly, we welcome all questions. So if you have any question, feel free to drop them in the Q&A comment box. All right. So what we do at Secure Intelligence Limited, all right, so we are still trained solution builders. We apply technologies to drive effectiveness. We have the agility and also build businesses also position to help enterprises scale globally. So we have four pillars also in CIL. Also, we have a global mindset, we have multi-cloud competence, we have the agility and also the growth. So having said that, I'm going to be handing over the floor to Emmanuel. So Emmanuel, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you so much, Wale, for the warm welcome. Good day, everyone. My name is Emmanuel, and I am a cloud engineer here at Secure Intelligence. So today I'm going to be presenting on the topic proactive cloud monitoring, prevent issues before they arise. So this is how we are going to be proceeding in the course of this presentation, right? So the first is we define what cloud monitoring is, right? Because we need to know what we are talking about. Then we look at the tools used to perform monitoring on the AWS cloud, right? And then we look at proactive monitoring approaches. So the best ways, the best strategies as to how to actually monitor our applications, our resources, or workloads on the cloud. Then we look at the key metrics to monitor. It's not just enough to know the services to use to monitor. It's not enough to know how to do it. It's also good that we know what we are monitoring, right? Then we look at the best practices for proactive monitoring, and then we conclude our presentation. So what is cloud monitoring? It has to do with the observing the health, performance, and security of cloud resources, right? It helps to ensure operational efficiency and reliability. So to explain what cloud monitoring is, I just want to give an example of say you have a child or a ward in school, right? It's a responsible parent or guardian should have their child in school, but then it's not just good enough to have that child in school. You also have to monitor the performance of that child in school, so as to ensure that that person is learning, right? So that is the same ideology that applies to cloud monitoring. When you come to the cloud, it's also important that you monitor the workloads, the applications that you are using, right, to ensure that you are highly secure, you are cost optimized, you are efficient, and you are reliable. So why is proactive monitoring important, right? It helps us to identify issues before they impact users, right? An example I always like to give about the importance of monitoring is that I remember when I started learning the AWS cloud, right? And I just created an account, and I saw and I heard that once you create an account, you have what is called a free tier, right? So AWS gives you a free tier of up to 12 months. So many of the services or many of the resources you provision within that 1 year is going to be free. So, but I didn't know that there was a limit to this, right? So there was a time I played with the resource. I finished, just watching a video on a particular resource, and then I tested it out. I tested it out on my account, but I forgot to delete it, right? Then at the end of the month, I got an email from AWS stating that this was the cost I had to pay. It was painful because I did not use the resource, right? I just provisioned it and I forgot to delete it, which is actually a bad practice. When you provision something on the cloud, it's always good that you delete it so that you don't pay for what you did not use. But that's by the way. So, but the point is that I forgot, and it's actually a human thing to forget sometimes. But that's why we are here today, right? To learn ways by which we can actually prevent these kinds of issues before they actually occur. So had it been I I had set up something like a budget on my account, right? And then I connect it with a CloudWatch alarm, right? Such that if I set a condition like I don't want to pay more than $5 a month or $10 a month, right? If it is up to $8, I want you to notify me, right? I would have not had paid as much as I was charged, right? Because I actually monitored my bill. I actually monitored the costs that I was being charged, right? So that is why monitoring is important. They help you to prevent issues before they happen, right? It also helps us to reduce downtime, improve performance, and optimize cost, as I have said, and as we are going to be seeing. Next slide, please. So what are the tools that we can use to perform monitoring on the AWS cloud? So there are a whole lot of tools, but we're just going to focus, or we're just going to see three briefly. So the first is CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is, in my opinion, one of the main services that is being used for monitoring on the AWS cloud. So it's a central tool for monitoring AWS resources and applications. It helps you to collect and track metrics, logs, and events. So there's a difference between logs and metrics, right? So logs are more detailed information about a particular process, but metrics is just a unit of data, a point of data, for example, CPU utilization, networking and out, EBS feed rate, and so on and so forth. But the point is that all of this data, all of this information, you can capture them with the use of CloudWatch, and then it allows you to make informed decisions. The second is CloudTrail. So CloudTrail helps us to track user activity and API usage. It provides auditing and compliance capabilities. So CloudTrail helps us to capture a whole lot of things that happen in our accounts, in our AWS account or AWS environments. Not everything, but helps us to capture many things. For example, if a user logs in into the account, with CloudTrail, you can actually monitor for that. You can actually get notified, and something that you would want to implement your account to improve the security posture of your account or environment is that you might want to be notified anytime somebody uses the root credentials to log in. That is to maybe use root credentials to log in and then create resources. This is something that is not best practice, because the root user is like all powerful in the AWS account. So you don't want the credentials of your root user to be compromised. You don't want to even use it at all. So if you monitor for that particular activity, you get notified anytime such events happens, and then you can make decisions based on that. So that is another importance of having monitoring set up, right? So CloudTrail helps us to monitor the API usage of so many things. For example, you have production databases and you don't want people to delete it, right? Even if when people try to, maybe you can also set up protection that prevents people from deleting it. But if somebody tries or attempts to delete it, you can actually get notified, or that trail is being recorded on CloudTrail. Then finally, we have AWS X-Ray. So AWS X-Ray provides end-to-end tracing for analyzing and debugging applications, the application, and also the bottlenecks that might be associated with the application. Right, next slide. All right, so we are going to take a look at proactive cloud monitoring approaches, right? So the first we have is disaster recovery strategies. So, I shared how I got charged an amount of money because I forgot to delete a resource that I did not use. So that does not necessarily it's not a disaster, right? If we are to follow AWS's definition of what a disaster is, but then for me it was a disaster really because I had to pay for resources I did not use. But that could have been avoided if I had monitored for several things on my account or for some things on my account. So you can use CloudWatch alarms to monitor predefined thresholds for critical metrics and then integrate with SNS for notification, right? So like I said earlier, you can actually use CloudWatch alarms to monitor for different metrics. For example, you can tie a CloudWatch alarm or you connect it with your AWS budget to ensure that you are not spending more than a particular amount every month. So for example, if you just have $100 to spend on your account every month, you can add a CloudWatch alarm to that price such that, for example, if the cost you are accruing in your AWS account for that particular month is getting up to $100 or it's getting up to $100, you can get notified with the use of SNS. SNS stands for simple notification service. So it helps you to get notified in case something is happening in your account that you want to be aware of, right? So that particular integration is made possible, and because of that, you can save yourself a whole lot of stress and headache, right? And there are other more use cases, right? It just depends on your own business use case, what you're trying to achieve with AWS Cloud. And you just figure out what you need to connect to each other, and then you have a strategy that can help you to prevent disasters. The second is to automate responses, right? So for this, we would want to use something called Lambda functions. So we can use Lambda functions. Lambda functions on AWS are what are known as serverless functions, right? So basically, they help us to do automation, right? You can also build backend applications, but then we just want to limit our understanding of Lambda functions to, automating tasks, right? So a service we can also use here in addition to Lambda is config, AWS config. So basically what config helps you to do is to, flag resources that are not compliant with the rules you have set. So with AWS config, you define what we call config rules, right? So config rules, they are basically saying that it's basically you saying that I don't want this to happen, I don't want this to happen, I don't want this to happen. Right, so they don't prevent those actions from happening. For example, you can say, I don't want A to happen. It does not prevent A from happening, right? But what it does is that if A should happen, config is going to notify you that, okay, A actually happened, and it's going to flag that as, it's going to call it non-compliant, and then you are made aware of that particular thing, and then you can go and correct. So it's for compliance, basically. So it does not stop something from happening, but if that thing should happen, it tells you that it happens. So basically it's reactive. That's the word. So when, for example, to just relate it to the AWS cloud. So for example, you can have a security group. You have security groups in your account or in a region. And then you say that for all the security groups, you don't want port 22 to be open. So port 22 is the port that we use to do SSH. That is to log into a server, a remote server. Maybe you don't want that to be done because of security reasons. You want people to, or you want your workers, your staff, your engineers to log in via Fleet Manager using systems manager, right? You want that to be what is being practiced in your environment to improve the security posture of your account, right? So what happens if, like I said, it does not prevent somebody from creating an instance and then opening port 22 on the security group, right? But once that happens, config is going to flag that, and then it's going to inform you that, okay, this actually happened, and it's going to consider that resource non-compliant. So what you can do is that you can actually plug that config rule to a Lambda function that, okay, if this happens, if somebody opens port 22 on a security group, I want you to go and auto-remediate that for me. I want you to go and correct it. And correct it by how? I want you to delete that particular rule so that that resource becomes compliant, you see. So basically, we have automated a response, right? So you have automated what should happen if a particular thing happens, right? Or what should follow if a particular thing happens, right? So you can also do a lot of things, but then I'm just going to limit our discussion to that. You can auto restart instances or scale services when needed, right? Then we have monitor logs and events. So you can use CloudWatch logs to collect application and system logs and set up events to trigger actions based on system changes, right? So to explain this, just imagine if we have a web application that is hosted on an EC2 instance, right? So your web application is hosted on an EC2 instance, and you have that the CPU utilization of your instance is going above 80%. So that means that your instance is being overwhelmed. So a whole lot of requests are coming in from your end users, and it makes sense that you make a decision. Right? That's another importance of monitoring. So with CloudWatch, you get metrics like CPU utilization that you can check to see if your EC2 instance, for example, is being overwhelmed, so you can make decisions based on that. So you can once you have that instance, you have that metric CPU utilization going over 80%. Now you can take an action. For example, it could be that you want to increase the size of the instance from a smaller instance to a bigger instance, or you want to leave the instance the same size but create a new instance so that some traffic will be diverted to that new instance, so in such a way that the main instance or the original instance you had is not overwhelmed. So these are some of the decisions you can make as a result of monitoring, right? That helps you to prevent issues before they actually arise. So the issue that can occur in such a situation is that because of, let's say your CPU, the CPU utilization now gets to 100%. So what is going to be happening is that your end users will not be getting a response from your server as quick as they should, right? Because now the machine is overwhelmed basically. So they send requests, but then the response is not coming as fast as it could because the server is busy dealing with previous requests, right? So that is what logs and events can help us do even on the AWS cloud. All right, so some of the key metrics to monitor. So I also have to state before I go on that what a disclaimer really, some of these metrics that you want to monitor, or the metrics you want to monitor, the key metrics you want to monitor is dependent on the kind of workload you are running on your AWS cloud. So for example, there are some companies that do not use servers to host the application. They make use of S3 buckets. For example, if I'm launching my application or web application, just a simple web application on an S3 bucket and using CloudFront, there's no need to monitor for CPU utilization because this is the metric that is tied to EC2 instances. I hope that is clear. So it is dependent on the kind of workload you're running, right? You don't just monitor anyhow, right? Because you had somebody is monitoring for CPU utilization, you decide to do so. It depends on what you are using the AWS cloud for. But generally, these are some metrics you would want to monitor for, right? So the first is CPU utilization. I had spoken about that in the previous slide. So you can actually monitor CPU for CPU utilization, right? High usage can signal performance bottlenecks or resource constraint, like I said. So if the CPU utilization is very high, it means that that instance is overwhelmed, right? You want to make a decision as a result of that metric you are seeing. Maybe you want to increase the size of the instance or scale out, right? On the other hand, if the CPU utilization is low, maybe below 30%, and you have two instances, maybe you have two or more instances that is being tied to an auto scaling group, you want to terminate that one that is below 30% because it's not being optimized. And you have other instances, for example, that can be maybe 50% and 60%. So there's no point having that extra one when the two applications you have or the two servers you have can handle the workload. So the second point is that we can also monitor based on memory usage, right? Monitor for memory leaks or overutilization. You want to know if you're actually making quality use of the memory that comes with the instance or the server that you provisioned. You can also monitor based on traffic, right? So identify anomalies like spikes or drops in traffic. So you want to, metrics that can help you here are metrics like network in and network out that determines or that measures the amount of requests that are coming in from your end users and the amount of responses that your server is dishing out back to the end users. You can also monitor for your disk I/O and storage. So you monitor your EBS volumes now, and you make decisions based on that. So at this point, I want to say that if what I have said so far is something you want to implement in your own AWS environment, right? In your own, you want to monitor your applications to ensure that your application, the security posture of your application or your workload is high, right? So that you are not being bothered by unnecessary things, really. I want to just say that we do that at Secure Intelligence. So at Secure Intelligence, we can help you to set up monitoring in such a way that you are able to indeed prevent issues before they arise, right? So we do this for businesses. We do this for businesses of all kinds, both small businesses, large businesses, medium scale businesses, and so on and so forth. So if this is something you're interested in, our sales rep would have their email sent to the chat, and then you can send them an email, or their email will be sent to the chat, and then you can send them a request, and then they'll take you up from there. Next slide, please. All right, so we're just going to look at the best practices now for proactive monitoring. So the first is that you want to set up regular health checks, right? So health checks are features. It's a feature on AWS that helps you to ensure that your servers or services are working as expected, right? So you want to make sure that the servers you have or the services you have your applications in, they are working as expected. And for this, you can set up health checks. You can set up health checks on your target load balancers, even on your DNS records, right? So it's good that you always set health checks so that if your application is not working as it should, you can be able to remediate for that. So for example, say you have a web application that is hosted on an EC2 instance, and that the security group that is tied or is attached to that instance does not have port 443 open, right? Before people can start reacting to that, because they will not be able to access your server basically, because as a result of that port being closed, target group can actually flag that and would consider that instance to be unhealthy, right? So it's something that obviously makes sense to set up. Then secondly, enable detailed monitoring. So by default, your instances sends metrics and logs, or no, sends just metrics to your CloudWatch logs every 5 minutes, right? Sorry, your instances send metrics to CloudWatch every 5 minutes, right? That's the default setting of that comes with AWS. But if you want to have a setting by which you get by which your metrics are being sent to CloudWatch every 1 minute, you have to enable detailed monitoring. So with detailed monitoring, you have your instance or your metrics from your instances are sent to CloudWatch every minute. So the advantage of this is that it helps you to react to events faster, right? As opposed to waiting for 5 minutes before you get the next batch of metrics, right? So this is something you might want to have set up for your servers on that host your application. The third is that you also want to enable multi-region monitoring, right? So if you have your workload to be set up in multiple AWS regions, for example, in the US and in maybe a region in Europe, it makes sense that you also set up monitoring for both of those regions, right? To ensure that they are available and to ensure that they are working optimally, right? You don't want a situation whereby you just focus on one region alone and then you are just leave the other. That's fine if that other region that you're not monitoring for is not important at all. Maybe your sandbox environment is there where you just play with stuff. But if it's also a production environment, even a test environment, it makes sense that you set up monitoring there to ensure that your application is really reliable and available. So the last point I have is to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning for anomaly detection. So you don't have to actually bring your own custom code or ML models to detect any anomalies in your account. AWS already have services that can do that for you. For example, there's something known as Compute Optimizer on AWS, right? So with Compute Optimizer, it works with EC2 instances. So it helps you to know if the instance you have provisioned for a particular workload is the instance type. Now it helps you to know if the instance type you have provision for a particular workload is the best instance type for that. Because you see, when you create an EC2 instance or a server, right, you have to select a type. So that the type is basically it deals with things like the processor, like how fast, how big, how powerful it is, and all of those stuff. So the bigger the instance type, the more you have to pay, and vice versa, right? So a challenge many businesses have, and something that we have helped many businesses to solve via secure intelligence, is that some people, they have workloads on their accounts, but then they don't know the particular instance type to use, right? They don't know the optimal instance type to use, and as a result of that, the application is suffering, either because they are not using because they are using an instance size that reduces the performance of the application. So people are actually having to wait, like when request comes into the servers, it takes a whole lot of time for the computers or the servers to process that request before giving a response, or they are overpaying. The servers they are using is very large, while the workload that is in that server is something that does not require that high processing power, right? So with Compute Optimizer, it gives you a recommendation based on what you have installed on that application. So it tells you if your instance is over provision or the provision optimized, right? So this is something you want to use it to do. Next slide. And also, like I said, here at Secure Intelligence, if you actually want to monitor your applications to ensure that they are optimal at every point to prevent issues before they arise, you want to have a call with us to ensure that we help you set that up, right? And it will always be a pleasure to work with you. So in conclusion, proactive monitoring allows early detection and resolution of issues, like I have explained throughout the course of this presentation, right? So it helps you to detect a whole lot of things like the issue I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, where I forgot to delete the resource, and at the end of the day, it cost me a whole lot. So at the beginning, I had set
All
up
right, thanks so much.
a strategy for monitoring. I would have I would have been aware of that, and then I would have made decisions based on that. So it also provides AWS also provides a comprehensive suite of tools such as CloudWatch, CloudTrail, Trusted Advisor. We didn't talk about Advisor, but something that you can use for seamless monitoring, right? You can
Sure.
also automation and alerts also reduce manual intervention and and system enhance system reliability. In general, monitoring helps us to optimize performance, cost, and security, ensuring business continuity. Thank you so much for your time. I would be expecting or taking questions now. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, Emmanuel. That was awesome. That was fantastic. And also, if you have any questions, please kindly do well to put it on the Q&A comment box. All right. So Emmanuel, we have a question for you. So Emmanuel, for companies new to cloud monitoring, what would you recommend as the first step to getting started with AWS monitoring tools like CloudWatch and CloudTrain?
All right. Thank you for the question. So the first thing I would advise is, or I would recommend, is that you first of all understand your business goals, right, and your use case, right. So you want to, what services are you using to host your workloads or to um what services are you using to host your workloads in summary? So you have to understand that first, and then you make decisions based on that, right? So if you are, like I said, you okay. So when you know the services you want to use, and then now you identify, you want to understand your workload, and then the resources that the services you can use to actually host that workload. For example, say you want to create a web application, and that web application is going to be, you just want to use S3 bucket and CloudFront, right? You don't need to start using, um, you don't need to start monitoring for CPU utilization, like I said. So you have to understand what you want first, and then you make decisions based on that. Then once you get an understanding of your use case, you can now start making use of the services that will help you to achieve that goal, right? So you can use CloudWatch, for example, you can use CloudTrail, but the first step I would say is that you need to understand your business use case first. Thank you, Wally.
Right. So Emmanuel, that was a wonderful answer. And also there's another question for you right here. Thank you so much for that wonderful answer. So the question is, what advice would you give organization about transitioning from one premise to another, from transitioning from monitoring to a cloud native to monitoring approach? I hope you understand the question, Emmanuel.
Yeah, please take it again one more time.
So what advice would you give organization about transitioning from on-premise monitoring to a cloud-native monitoring approach?
Okay, so that's a nice one. So I'd say the first thing you need to do is that you need to adopt a cloud native mindset, right? Because the way and manner you do monitoring on premise is different from cloud, because the cloud has its own native tools that are being utilized to do monitoring. So you have to adopt a cloud native mindset, right? And then you leverage manage monitoring services that the cloud provides you, like CloudWatch, CloudChain, and X-Ray, right? That fit into your application, that fit into your workload. This question is also related to the one I had answered, right? So you have to leverage, you have to have a cloud native mindset, and then you adopt services that fit into what you want to do, right? Then I would also say that it's good you focus on application performance, not just it's good you focus on application performance, not just on the infrastructure, right? Also, it's good that a good use case to have is to implement a centralized logging and monitoring. So you can have, for example, a particular account where all the logs for your account are being dumped, right? It's good, it's usually best practice to do this, and you have this for like an extended period of time, depending on the sensitivity of the workloads that you have running on those accounts. So that's what I'm going to say.
All right. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that answer. That's very insightful one. So before we wrap up, I will want us to know about a fantastic opportunity that will be offering at Secure Intelligence Limited. So I'll be dropping a link in the Q&A comment box, so you can click on the link to book a one-on-one section with us. So it's a free one-on-one conversation with our cloud experts. So this is a great chance to get a personalized advice on how proactive cloud monitoring can work for your organization. So whether you're looking for how to improve your efficiency, prevent downtime, or optimize your current setup, our team is here to help you. So don't miss out. You can go ahead to book a section with us. So we at CIL Intelligence Limited, we have the best partner because we will be providing you with the right tools and also services to meet your AWS cloud. So if you are new to AWS and cloud, please don't feel left out. You can learn and develop cloud basic skills, and also you can become a cloud expert. Also, you can become a cloud practitioner. So we also have CIL Academy. So CIL Academy is a range of service that can help you get started. So even if you have no level of knowledge, or you have no knowledge of tech, you can come to CIL Academy. We'll be able to transit it from knowing nothing or from having no idea of tech to becoming an expert. And also in the tech program, where you can also start your career in cloud engineering, data engineering, as well as you being a content engineer. Also, we have our AWS skill builder. We have our AWS infrastructural learning, where you can train individuals, corporate teams, and also businesses on relevant skills that requires to migrate, maybe to build and manage your AWS infrastructure. Having said all of that, so thank you so much for joining today's section, and a big thank you to Emmanuel for sharing his insight. And also, of course, so you can also join us on our social media platform. You can connect with us on our social media platform on Instagram at CIL_teams. We also have LinkedIn, also where you can connect with us on CIL Intelligence. We have Twitter at CIL_teams. You can also connect with us on Facebook, also where we have at CIL Teams. On YouTube, you can always watch on YouTube also at www.youtube.com/CIL_teams. So if you miss out of any of this presentation, and always go to our YouTube channel to watch in case you miss out of any of this presentation. And thanks again. I look forward to seeing you in our next webinar section. Have a wonderful day, everyone. My name is Olayinka Babawale.